Redux have an UI and Redux have a reducer, right? So, and usually Redux have actions in a Redux. Use reducer also, I showed you the same point. What I will do is we designed a video library project now. In that project, I will add this Redux store and I will upload that example you see. Today, I am explaining the process, but I will add this into that project. I will upload that. You can try. You can see that, right? So in that, or there is a shopping cart we created. There also you can try. You can try that example there. Okay. So what is store? What is state? What is UI? What is reducer? And what are actions? These already I explained. Store is the location where data is present. And I already explained why we need Redux store. What is Redux store? Redux is a state container. That means it is a state management library required for JavaScript based application. Why you need a state management library? We need a state management library for we need a state management library to maintain data across requests. To maintain data across requests, you need a state management library. And Redux store is providing a state management library. Without that also we can do. How we can do? By using use reducer. Already I showed the process. Here the same process we follow, but that means 1 second. Yeah. That means what we do is we will maintain a separate file for store. We will maintain a separate file for reducer. We will maintain separate file for actions. We trigger them and we use them in our application. Previously, what we done when I showed you use reducer, we kept everything in one place, right? That means explain that here. Actually, first thing, store comprises of data and state is responsible for transporting data, which is called as payload. We call it as payload. It is responsible for translating data. And UI presents the data and reducer configures the actions, action type, action and initial state, actions and initial state. And action is nothing but actions trigger to update data into store. Actions trigger to update data into store. This we call dispatch. We call as dispatch. We have store, we have state, and all these things. Remember, if you haven't practiced that use reducer, you can't understand this, because I clearly explained that use reducer, right? The process we already done. Only the point is here we maintain adding items into shopping cart. Adding items into shopping cart. So, and cart in memory. Cart. So, and keep shop you can suppose. That is the concept suppose. So you are adding in video library, what you can do, you can keep the information about recently watched videos. You can maintain that in a like library. That means you can store some data in the and use from any location. That is the intention actually. So if it is a shopping cart, if it is a video library, these are all the right. So generally, how we can add items mean. So I will show a simple process here how we do that. Suppose we are having some, so we are having some component here. So let's put some component like shopping, and I will just add shopping.jsx. We are using it. So this is example here, export function shopping, and it should return some presentation. And just like here, I'm adding a class container fluid. And just use effect. First use here constant and some products set products is equal to use state array we are defining. Okay, so use products is an array, and we will configure here use effect, and let's add some effect here. And what is the point is we are configuring what are the products. Axios. So Axios uses the method as get, and URL is coming from http fakestoreapi.com/products, and we have then a callback function will get the response, and we will put set products response.data. Roughly, I'm adding the products data here. I'll just keep a simple div class as card, margin to padding to, style is some width as some 200 pixel like this. Roughly, I will add an image. So this card should repeat. So that means this card should repeat for products dot map. So we have to read every product, and for every product we need to design a card. And the image we are having for that image source is what? Product dot image. So class I given card image top, and just we will keep a div. and class as card body. And here we are having some title. So product dot title. And in this we have another. And this we are having a button add to cart. So class BTN, some danger something. And this is class card footer. Okay. These are the basic things we are having. And we will keep some style and height as some 140 pixel. Okay, this is the button we are having. BI card 3. Okay. Now this is the data we are displaying. Actually, every product contains an ID, what type, number type, title, string type. It contains image, string type. It contains price, that is number type. It contains category. Category is string type. Another. So description. Description is also what type? String type. Like this, we are having some rating. Rating is an object with the rate as number and count as number. Now we will keep this in a flexible design here. We'll put deflex. Just deflex is we have flex wrap. Okay, let's keep that in the startup. What is it? Shopping. Shopping is in the startup. Now what should happen here is, so npm start. First, when user clicks add to cart, those items should be in the memory so that we can access and use from anywhere in the memory. So what is the challenge we were facing earlier is store the data and access and use from anywhere. That you can now manage by using Redux Store. For that, to use Redux Store, first you have to install Redux in your project, right? How to install the Redux Store? This is the Redux toolkit. So this is Redux, and you have to install the Redux toolkit. This is Redux toolkit you have to install. So npm install Redux.js toolkit. That is the toolkit that you have to install. That is the first thing you need to do. If you want to use Redux in your application, you have to install this. Size. Okay, so temporarily we added all these items. All these items are added. What is our intention is when user clicks on that add to cart button, I want to store them in the memory. So for that, and access from somewhere you want. You can access from any location you want. So then what we will do is here 100 pixel. Okay. Yeah. So now what we will do here, height. This is actually height I will give. This is width, card image top, height also. I will just give 100 pixel. That looks fine, simple, right? Now, when user clicks add, these must be stored in memory. That means now we have to create a store. In that store, we have to store these details. Actually, when you click add to cart, this product related data should be delivered to store. That means we need to maintain a store. Actually, store have two details, like suppose we want an array of all the products and we want some count, because you see right side they show count, 2 items in the cart, 3 items in the cart, right? In that case, one array is cart items, another one is cart items count. We need two values to store. And when user clicks add to cart, an action must be triggered. That means we need to trigger an action. An action should dispatch. What it should dispatch? It should dispatch add method. Into that, it should carry product details and it should send that product details into the store. So this add is called action. Add to cart is an action. What data it is carrying is called as a payload. We call it as payload. That means what it will do when user clicks add to cart button, automatically the current product detail is collected and it is stored inside the store. Like that, every add to cart button that will be stored. And the count will be updated. Count is nothing but length. Length of how many items are there in that array, that is count. And why we are creating a separate store and why you are keeping that in that store? Because that information we want to access until they sign out. That means until they sign out, in every page I want to show it. Then in a user is moving from one component to another, data will be lost. I told you two things, how to carry data from one component to another. How to carry data from one component to another. Tell me the techniques you learned in React. Tell me the techniques that you learned in React which are used for transporting data from one component to another. Properties, that is carrying data from one component to another. But data is not stored. Carrying data, okay, props is one. But is that stored in memory? You can access from memory. That is not in memory. We can transport by using props, but it is not in memory. We learned context. Use context. Use context is carrying data from one component to another. We learned route parameters. Route parameters. You are transporting data from one component to another using route parameter. by using use context, by using use reducer. You can use so many techniques, right? So that's the reason I keep on asking you that you practice whatever you learned first. Listening is not enough. You will forget everything, right? Because suddenly if anybody asks question this, you will simply say that I haven't learned, right? Because remember, whatever needed for at any level of React interview, we learned in this class. That means even for 10 years experienced person, what they ask related to general React, we learned here. Only the point is you need to recall them. You need to know correctly, right? So that's the reason I will give a list of some FAQs. You go through them, go through those questions, because already we discussed, but refresh once you practice all topics. And because you got these 2 days time, I thought you will practice and come all this, and any doubts are there, we can handle that. So try, so check all this. Now actually how to do this, it's a lengthy process here. Now what we do, generally everybody have different approach. That means storing the data, accessing the data, everyone have different approach. What is a professional approach? I will show you. Professional approach is how. Actually, the professional approach here for that first point is install React Redux tool kit for project. I have a ready-made documentation. I will show that. So you have to install a React Redux toolkit in the project. This is the first thing you have to do. I will give this ready-made option here. Yeah. So this is what you have to install. npm install @react.js toolkit, Redux.js toolkit, and React Redux. This is the Redux toolkit you have to create. Next, what we have to do is, after creating this, generally basic process is, at professional level, what we do is we create a slicer. So generally, many people who work on Redux, they may not follow this because they just add one store, they will add one reducer, and they will directly manage. But at large scale projects, we do more clean separation. Many people who work on Redux, they may not work with slicers, but it is good to use a slicer. Slicer is nothing but it defines what is the data we need to maintain in our store. We will separately create a slicer, and this slicer we will send to store. Generally, what people do is directly they create a store, and in that store they maintain data. But at little higher level, what we do is, because in store different types of data will go. So generally everywhere when you are learning about Redux, they will show one example. In that case, they will directly create one store and store that. But in real time project, what happens in single store, we store data coming from different components. maintain data in store, we will create slicers. These slicers will store the data. So what is the purpose of slicer is nothing but actually the role of slicer is nothing but this is the role of slicer. So it is a component library. This is the role of slicer. And it is used for managing all the concept. This I will give an example here. This is a ready-made example I am just giving to you. I will upload this into your video tutorial separately and I will show you, right? Actually, what is a slicer? Slicer is used to configure initial state. It is used to configure initial state. And it is going to create a reference name. And it contains the state and actions. It contains the state and actions. Everything is present in a slicer. Remember, this is not mandatory. You can directly, actually, when we learned reducer, what we learned? We learned directly creating a reducer function. In that reducer function, we have initial state and we have actions. But in Redux store, what we do? We will first create a slicer. In that slicer, we will maintain initial state and action. Right? So in use reducer, we created a reducer directly, but here we will create a slicer. And actually, the slicer contains initial state. Two details we want to store. One is what? Cart items. Another one is what? Cart items count. How to create slicer? There is a method called create slicer. By using that method, we will create. In that, if you have practiced use reducer, it will have two details, state and actions. So here it is going to have initial state, slicer name. Another one is reducers. Reducers contain an action called add to cart. What add to cart will do? It will collect the product information and push into which array? Cart items array. And what cart count contains? It contains length of cart items. That means when you click add to cart button, what will happen? The product related information, it will carry and it will store inside this array. How to store any data in an array? By using push. Right? What is the payload? I showed you that payload is nothing but data coming from add to cart button. The product related information we are doing. This already we done in use reducer. In use reducer, we sent views count. How many people are watching? We showed that views count. Here we are sending what? The cart count, right? How many items? How many items are there in the cart? We have to define. This is the first thing we have to create. This is the first thing we have to create. Let's do this. That means what we do is, I will take a simple file here. So we need to create one simple file. Let me copy the code. So that is the code we have to create actually. This is the slicer code. So that is what the slicer is having. And we need to configure that. So let's create a new file. What is the file we are creating here? We are adding a new file. And what we will do is, we will maintain the name as cart slicer dot what js. So the cart slicer we are creating. Actually, it is a TS file. They have this example related to TS. You can use a JSX file, JavaScript or TypeScript file. And here you are configuring the cart slicer. This is the cart slicer. We have to import the cart slicer from toolkit and we have to export that. This is what we need to do. That is the state and that is the action we need to configure. That means what are the data we want to maintain in store? Two details we want to maintain in store. What are those? Cart items. Another one, cart items count. And cart slicer. The slicer name is cart because I told you that user details one slicer, admin details another slicer, cart details another size slicer, like that. So at high level, we create like this. Otherwise, generally what people do is directly they maintain a store, right? So this is good, lengthy, correct approach actually. What is the slicer name? Cart. And what is the initial state? Initial state, it contains cart items, another one, cart count. And what are the actions? We have one action. What is that action? Add to cart. What that add to cart should do? It should collect the cart items. Into that, it should push the data coming on button click. On button click, they will send data. The data is called as payload. That payload is stored inside it. Payload is nothing but product information. The product related information will be stored in cart items. After that, it should import. And this cart slicer need to be exported so that we can use from any another component. So for that, what we have to do? Export. So constant. What is the method to export? Add to cart. Remove from cart, like that. You can add any number of actions. Add to cart is adding item. Remove cart is removing item. How you will remove item? You can use slice method and you can remove based on the index number, right? Initially, how many actions are there? Only one action is there, add to cart. So this add to cart is exported. After it is exported, now this reducer can be used anywhere. We have to export add to cart method and we have to export the reducer. Reducer is nothing but this one. Reducer contains action. In that action, we need to configure everything. Okay. This is the slicer we created. After creating the slicer, slicer contains what? Slicer comprises of initial state and slicer contains actions. These are the two basic things. I will copy this here. I will show you this point here. I will put okay. After creating the cart slicer, next what? This slicer contain actions. We have to use these actions in our component. What is the one more? What we have to create is, after creating the slicer, the next step, you have to configure the store. The store is defined in this way. Store.jsx. I will use this one here. After doing this, next point is you have to configure the store. You have to configure store. We will add a file called store.jsx. In this store, what we have to do? We have to import the slicer and you have to import the data that is coming from the slicer, initial state. That means you need to add another file. And what is that file? So store.jsx. In that store.jsx, we need to add this store. And usually this is the store we are configuring. So how to configure the store? We have to use the function called configure store. The store contains reducer, and reducer contains the data coming from cart slicer. What cart slicer is having? Whatever coming from cart slicer, it will store. What cart slicer is having? Cart items. It is having cart items count, and it is having an action called add to cart. That means this cart slicer, whatever is having, it will be used in store. Actually, what people do is, without writing cart slicer, directly here they write everything. That means here what they write, initial state. I written in use reducer na, initial state and actions. But what at high level people do is, they create one slicer and they inject that slicer into the cart. That's what they do. So you need to handle this one. That means store.jsx. You need to define that. So you have to take the cart slicer and make the everywhere. Where to use the store? In any component, we should able to access the store. In any component, if you have to access the store, how you will access? How to access the store in every component? To access the store in every component, then what is the point? I told you, you remembered cookies. If you want to access cookies from every location, then it should be configured at application level. We need a cookie provider. Similarly, must be accessed from every component inside the application. Then you have to configure at which level? Application level. You need to define it in index.js and configure provider. We have to configure the provider. That means now what we have to do? We have to go to index.js. That is the provider. We have to use a provider for that store. You need to configure this. That means what we will do? We will go here. Actually, already it is using. So it is using cookies provider. So I will remove this cookies provider. This shopping have to use a provider. That means here we need to define a provider. Actually, the provider will come from which location? The provider will come from Redux store. That means from Redux store, first you have to import a provider and you can use that provider. So what you need to do is, first you need to import a provider and you need to configure. That means you need to add here. So import. So we have a provider. So, and what we have to do, we have to import another one. What we have to import? We have to import store from components. Now what we need to do here, we have to write a provider. And this provider have to use the store. It should use the store. It should configure the store. And from where actually the store is coming, whatever the store you defined here. That means in this store, what we have? In that store, we have a slicer. In that slicer, what we have? Cart items and cart count. Now it is maintained at application level. You are writing in index means it is maintained in application level. So here we are accessing our component. What is the component? Shopping. This component will use and everything in that component will work. That is how we configure the store. That means we need to maintain a store and we need to define the store. After configuring the store, now what? When user clicks, that means slicer is ready, actions are ready, and your store is ready. When user clicks add to cart button, we should dispatch the data. That means now we will go to shopping.js. Here we have to import. You have to import use dispatch actually. You have to import use dispatch. So from where we have to import this use dispatch? This use dispatch we have to, it is a function. It is present in which location? Redux store. So I will write that here. So next step, what we have to do, dispatch actions. We need to configure. This is our product now. In the product component, we have to use dispatch from which location? Redux store. And you need the cart slicer. You need the cart slicer. So we need two options here, add to cart and dispatch. So here we will import. So add to cart from cart slicer, and we have to import use dispatch from we have Redux store. So Redux store, what is that? At the net Redux store, React Redux is there. React Redux, where it is there? It's there. That library is not there. I'll check once. React Redux library is there actually. Why it is not showing? Let's check. Okay. Now here we need to create a constant, and the constant is what? Dispatch. It have to use dispatch. We should use that dispatch. And when it should use this dispatch have to dispatch an action. In reducer, we dispatched an action on this button click. That button click, on button click, we have to dispatch. What to dispatch? On that button click, we have to dispatch add to cart. Into add to cart, what we have to do? We have to send the product details. Current product details we need to dispatch. So how you configure that? Just handle add to cart, and we need to dispatch that add to cart. Already add to cart button is there, right? Yeah. I'm writing on click add to cart, this one. On click, and it should send the product details. We will write a function here. And what is the function? Is handle add to cart. So what it should get? So it should get the product details, and it should dispatch this action name. Action name is what? Add to cart. Which data? Product. That's what we need to do. That means on add to cart button click, it will collect the product data. We are sending the product data here. It will collect the product data and dispatch to this action. What this add to cart action will do? It will collect the payload. Let's see. Go to the cart slicer. In the cart slicer, that payload is coming here. Add to cart is collecting the payload. Payload is data. And the data is pushed into cart items. Cart items, and it will update the cart length. It will display the cart length. So I will save this here. Let's test this here. So we are having some issue in compiling. React Redux cannot resolve. we haven't installed in this project. We have to install the Redux store. I haven't installed the Redux toolkit. We will install it. I just given this class related video I will upload into class, because you need to check level by level and practice this, because if you already done Redux example, reducer example, that is easy. Otherwise it is confusion. So that's the reason first I will upload a video for this. I will create one video for this entire session and I will upload that video. You can go through that, right? Example. And that video library also, I will explain through a video. You can try. Okay. You see, this is the Redux and it is not having card slicer. So component shopping store, where is the card slicer? Add to cart and this index. So this is the provider. So provider from Redux actually. It taken provider from React. It should be the Redux provider. Cart slicer have a problem. Where is that shopping edge? Shopping.js. Where it is present. Store.jsx some problem. Let's go to store.jsx. In that cart slicer have problem. Okay. So yeah, fine. Now let's see here. Yeah, that is fine. Okay. Now you see here how to test what data is stored in the store. Uh, you can download Redux developer tools. That means separately in your browser extensions you will find. I think I installed that in my Chrome browser. Actually, in your browser extensions, browser extensions will be there. Suppose you are using Chrome extensions. You can Google and download this one. This is Redux developer tools. This can download for Chrome browser. Redux developer tools, if you download for Chrome browser, then what you do is, this is our page. This is the page we are accessing here. And you can see in the extensions, you will find Redux developer tools. In the extensions, we have Redux developer tools. You can see that. This is used by developers to test whether Redux functionality is working or not. I will open that Redux developer tools. In the Redux developer tools, you can see this is the developer tool. And you see here in the Redux developer tools, it is showing you now in the store, two options are there. What are the two options in the store? We are having two options in the store. And what are those two options we are having is cart items and cart count. You have two items in that. Actually, here it will display so many things. That means you can see it is going to display. Yeah, it is going to display actions, state, difference. Difference means previous value, current value, everything. You see now, action means currently there are no action. State, this is the state. There is no difference. Currently everything is equal. That means there is nothing complex. I will open these extension tools. Yeah, it will be in this way. Now, what we will do now, let's click this add to cart button. Let's go to the state. Let's click add to cart button. That means one item is added to cart. We can put alert or something saying that added, and you can go to the extension and see the development tools. Here you have one item in the cart and you see that item detail will be there. That means it is storing the item here. That means one item is stored in the cart. And observe here action. Action is payload. What is the action type? Action type is add to cart. On add to cart, what data it is sending? It will get that information. You see state, you see difference, you see the difference. Previously it was 0, currently it is 1. And you see the trace. In the trace, it will show all the functionality, what happened, where you clicked, what you clicked, what data is sent, everything it will show. That means you can see all the screenshots, what it has done. In testing, it will show any failures are there, everything worked fine or not. That means it is going to display all the information in a more detailed way here. Right? That means you see the state and it will show that there is one item in the cart. And cart item count is how much? 1. I click on another, add to cart, and you can see this time in the tools, and you can see this time 2 items are in the cart. It will display those 2 items in the cart. And the point is, it is stored in the memory. So you can, it is just like in JavaScript, you have a local storage, you have a session storage, so that you can access and use from any place. So the intention of Redux is to keep the data so that we can access and use the data from any place. Actually, we do that by using use reducer also. By using use reducer function, we can manage, right? So this is the concept of working with Redux. This example I will upload. The video also I will upload. You can go through that. I will upload this example with our full stack end-to-end design. We created a full stack end-to-end design. In that project, I will put this and I will upload. You have to practice that, right? So if you can do this, that is enough, right? Because generally we need these kind of redux stores additionally when you are dealing with large scale data. Otherwise, just you can go with use reducer hooks and you can manage them, right? This is the example of redux, how it works, right? I hope you are clear with this, right? But you need to try practically, otherwise it is confusion you can't handle, right? I will upload this example with the video, you go through that and see that. With this we complete all the concept, and actually what we are doing is we are planning one workshop. That workshop is related to um, coding workshop. I will conduct that workshop during the weekend, right? So in that weekend workshop, I will post in classroom in our Google Classroom. You can attend that weekend workshop. There I will show you a mobile development related introduction to React, right? Mobile frameworks, how mobile development, mobile framework works. Because we have some other batches people also, so that everybody will attend that as a single workshop we will conduct. Mostly the coming weekend we will have that workshop. In that I will give introduction about mobile design, right? For that we use a concept called React Native, and that will be an online session. You can directly attend online. I will post an online link, right? You can attend that online, right? So if you missed it, I will upload into a YouTube video. You can go through that, because generally mobile development is different. For that you need a separate platform like Android, iOS environment to install. Then you can use React with mobile. There are so many frameworks. People use a framework like Ionic. People use frameworks like Apache, Cordova, native script, like that. So many frameworks are there. Sometimes you people use React Native like frameworks also. React Native, Ionic, so many frameworks are there. That that workshop we will conduct in a weekend, and that will be an online workshop. Concept of working with mobile development, right? So with this we finish all our React related concept. Whatever you learned last from Webpack onwards, that is just add on, just to know about them. So interviews related, everything will be up to our routing concept, end-to-end design, whatever we created up to that. I will upload some FAQs, you go through them. If you have any doubts, you let me know, right? I will, our practical session is there, right? Into that practical session, practical lab I uploaded now. In that practical lab, so you can post your comment if you have any doubts or any issues, so that we can get back there. React lab classroom could be created over there, okay? So you practice all this. If you have any doubts, you let me know in the class, so that I will conduct one more session for clarifying your doubts. If you have doubts, any doubts are there, right? After you practice all, if you have any doubts, I will conduct an online doubt session, right? In that online doubt session, you can clarify all the doubts that you are having, okay now, right? So with this we complete all the concept, and if you have any doubts, you can keep in touch in that classroom location, okay, right?